My sister secretly sold our father's workshop and told me, "You're not handy enough to care anyway." But when the new owner found a sealed drawer, it broke me. Dad died 2 years ago, and since then, I've been trying to keep everything together. The house we grew up in, the garden where he used to spend his weekends, and most of all, his workshop. I always thought I'd be the one to inherit it. I thought I'd be the one to carry on his legacy, to take care of the space where he spent countless hours crafting beautiful furniture, fixing broken things, or simply tinkering with his tools. But Felicity, well, she always had a different view of things. We were never close like Dad and I were. She was the academic one, the bookworm. I was the hands-on one. I learned from Dad, picked up his trade, and loved every minute of it. Felicity, on the other hand, preferred to stay inside and read. She wasn't interested in the work that kept our family grounded. And that never bothered me. I understood it. We were different, but I thought that was okay. Then, after Dad's funeral, Felicity started bringing up the idea of selling the house. At first, I didn't understand. She said it was too much for her to maintain. I tried to argue, tried to make her see how important the house was to me. But she just brushed me off. She said it was too big, too old, and it would be too expensive to keep up. I thought she just didn't get it. She always did this, making decisions without consulting me, like I didn't matter in the picture. It's not like I didn't have a say. The house was part of Dad's will, but I guess Felicity always knew how to push her way through. And somehow, I allowed it to happen. I let her talk me into agreeing to sell the house. The workshop wasn't mentioned in the will. There was nothing that said it was mine or hers. But it had always been a part of me. I felt it was my responsibility to take care of it. When she brought up selling the house, I tried to argue again, tried to convince her that someone needed to take care of that space. But she was determined. "You're not handy enough to care about the workshop anyway," she said one afternoon, her voice dismissive. "It's just a room full of clutter. What are you going to do with it?" Her words stung. I couldn't believe she didn't understand. The workshop was more than just a room to me. It was where Dad had taught me everything: how to measure, how to carve, how to be patient with my work. It was where we spent countless hours, sometimes talking, sometimes in silence, just working side by side. It was where I learned the value of something that took time, skill, and dedication to create. To her, it was just clutter. A place she never wanted to set foot in. I didn't argue that day. I was exhausted from the grief, from the loss. And, for once, I just let her have her way. So, she put the house on the market. And eventually, it was sold. A man named Thomas Bellamy bought the house and the workshop. He was an entrepreneur, someone who appreciated old tools and machinery. At least, that's what he told me when we met after the sale. He seemed genuinely interested in the workshop, so I tried not to let my feelings get the best of me. It wasn't mine to keep. I told myself that over and over again. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Months passed, and life moved on. I tried to focus on my work, my own life, but the loss of the workshop lingered in the back of my mind. I spent long nights in my apartment, thinking about what was left of my father. Everything had changed. The house was gone. The workshop was gone. Then, one afternoon, I got a phone call from an unfamiliar number. I answered it, thinking it was probably just a telemarketer or something. But the voice on the other end wasn't one I recognized. "Hello, is this Clara Whitefield?" the man asked. "Yes, this is she," I said, my heart starting to race. "My name is Thomas Bellamy," he continued. "I'm the new owner of your father's old workshop. I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I found something in the workshop, and I thought you might want to know about it." My stomach dropped. I had no idea what he could be talking about. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice shaky. "There's a drawer," he said, his tone a little unsure. "It's sealed, hidden behind a false panel in one of the cabinets. It looks like it's been there for a long time. I can't get it open, but I thought you should know." I froze. My mind raced. A hidden drawer? I didn't remember anything like that. Dad had always kept things neat and organized, but it was possible. He had his secrets. I remember as a kid, sneaking into the workshop after he'd gone to bed and searching through his things, wondering what he might be hiding. But I never found anything. I asked him to hold on to it until I could come by. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew I had to see it for myself. I drove to the workshop the next day, my heart in my throat the entire way. When I arrived, Thomas was already there, standing in the middle of the workshop, a small drawer in his hand. He looked as if he didn't know what to make of it. "I couldn't open it," he said, handing it to me. "It's locked. But I figured you might want to have a look." I took the drawer, my fingers trembling. It wasn't a large drawer, but it was heavy. It had a metal lock, rusted with age. I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. What could it possibly be? What had Dad kept hidden all these years? With a deep breath, I tried to open it. The lock clicked easily. I pulled it open, my hands shaking. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, old and worn. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Dad's. I hadn't seen his handwriting in months, but it was unmistakable. I sat down on the workbench, my heart racing as I flipped through the pages. At first, the entries seemed like nothing special, just everyday observations, some notes about projects he was working on, some random thoughts. But then, as I flipped further, I came across something that made my blood run cold. It was a conversation between Dad and Felicity. The entry was dated just a few months before his death. "Clara doesn't need the workshop," Felicity had said. "She's not like you. She'll never be able to handle it. It's just a burden. And you're getting too old to keep it up." I felt a lump form in my throat. The words stung. Dad had never mentioned this conversation to me. And what was worse, Felicity had made her decision long before I even knew what was happening. She had already planned to sell the house, sell the workshop, and I hadn't even known. It hit me harder than anything had in a long time. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my father's workshop, I was grieving the betrayal of my sister. Felicity had sold it all without a second thought. She didn't care about the things that mattered to me. She didn't care about Dad's legacy. And now, she had hidden all of it from me. I didn't know what to do. The journal felt like a blade in my chest, each word more painful than the last. I closed it and looked up at Thomas, who was standing silently nearby, watching me. I didn't know what to say to him, or what to say to anyone. My world had just been turned upside down. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this go. I could barely hold back the tears as I closed the journal and set it gently on the workbench. The weight of the discovery was unbearable. What was I supposed to do with this information? How was I supposed to feel? Angry? Betrayed? Lost? All of it. Every emotion was crashing down on me at once. Thomas, standing across from me, seemed to sense the intensity of my emotions. He didn't ask questions, didn't push me to talk. He just stood there quietly, giving me the space I needed. I don't know how long I sat there, holding the journal in my lap, staring at the worn leather cover. The room around me felt so familiar, but it was also so foreign now. It was like stepping into a dream that no longer belonged to me. The workshop that had once been filled with Dad's presence now felt like a stranger's space, haunted by his absence and the revelation of Felicity's betrayal. Finally, I spoke, my voice barely a whisper. "I can't believe she did this. I can't believe she hid this from me." Thomas didn't respond right away, but after a moment, he spoke quietly. "Sometimes, people make decisions that they think are for the best. They don't always see the bigger picture." I shook my head, still holding the journal tightly. This wasn't for the best. This wasn't about what was best for anyone. It was about her. It always has been. She's always been the one to make the decisions, and I've just gone along with it. I stood up then, pacing the small space of the workshop. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. My relationship with Felicity had never been perfect, but this was different. This was something I hadn't been prepared for. You know, I thought if I gave in, if I just went along with her plan, that it would get easier. That somehow, I'd be able to let go of the workshop and the house. But now I see that I was wrong. She never gave me a choice. Thomas nodded, understanding the weight of my words, but didn't push me to continue. I found myself standing by the back door of the workshop, staring out at the garden that Dad had always kept so meticulously. The flowers were still blooming, and the trees looked almost the same. But it was all so empty now. Dad wasn't there to tend to them, and the workshop that had once echoed with his voice, his laughter, and his work was silent. All that remained were the memories and this journal, this painful record of my sister's cold, calculated actions. I looked back at Thomas, who was still standing by the workbench, watching me with quiet sympathy. "Do you think it's worth confronting her?" I asked suddenly. The thought had only just occurred to me. I hadn't spoken to Felicity since the day she told me about selling the house, and I hadn't had the courage to reach out to her since I'd found out what she'd done. Thomas shrugged slightly, his hands in his pockets. "I can't tell you what to do, Clara. But sometimes, confronting the truth is the only way to get closure." I nodded, but my mind was still reeling. Confronting Felicity. It felt like too much, and yet, I couldn't leave things unresolved. I had to know why she did it. I had to hear her say it. Even if it hurt, even if it shattered the little pieces of the relationship we had left, I needed to understand. "I should call her," I muttered, more to myself than to him. I was already reaching for my phone, the urge to make things right clawing at me despite everything I felt inside. I stepped outside into the cool autumn air, my phone trembling in my hand. As the number rang, I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Part of me was terrified of what Felicity might say, and another part of me just wanted the whole thing to be over. When she picked up, her voice was flat, distant. "Clara, what's going on?" "I know what you did," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I know you sold the house. I know you sold the workshop. And I know about the journal." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she was going to hang up on me. But finally, she spoke. "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this," she said, her tone a little defensive, but strangely calm. "It's just a house. It's just a workshop. Dad's gone, Clara. We can't keep holding on to things that are never going to come back." "You think I'm just holding on to things?" My voice cracked with the weight of the emotion I was holding back. That workshop wasn't just a thing. It was where I spent every single moment with Dad. It's where I learned who I am. And you just sold it without asking me. Without even telling me what you were doing." She sighed heavily, like she was trying to remain patient, but I could hear the irritation creeping into her voice. "Clara, you don't get it. I did what had to be done. The house was too big for us, and neither of us were going to live there. You were never going to use the workshop. You've never been interested in any of that stuff." I felt my stomach drop, the sting of her words hitting me hard. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "I may not have been the handy one, but that workshop meant more to me than you'll ever understand. You've always made decisions like you're the only one who matters. But that wasn't your choice to make." Felicity was silent for a long time after that. I waited, my breath held, but no response came. I could hear her on the other end, probably trying to think of something to say that would make this all go away. "Clara," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you. I really didn't. But sometimes we have to let go. I thought it would be easier this way. For both of us." It was the first time I'd heard her sound this vulnerable, and it nearly broke me. But still, I couldn't let it go. Not yet. Not until I had all the answers. "I don't care what you thought would be easier," I said, my voice shaky but determined. "I needed you to see me. To see what that workshop meant to me. You didn't even try to understand, Felicity. You just did what was easiest for you. She didn't respond, and for a long moment, the silence between us felt heavier than anything I'd ever experienced. I can't just forget this, Felicity, I said, my voice faltering as I spoke the truth I had been avoiding for so long. You took everything from me without asking. And now I'm left trying to figure out how to fix what's broken between us. I don't even know where to start. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might say something that would make everything feel better. Something that would give me hope. But instead, she said the words that would haunt me for a long time: maybe you'll never understand, Clara. Maybe I'll never be able to fix what's broken. But I did what I thought was right. I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. This wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't the closure I needed. I'll figure it out, I said quietly, before hanging up. I stood there, staring at my phone for a long time, unsure of what to do next. I didn't feel better. I didn't feel anything except emptiness. I knew I couldn't stay in the workshop much longer. The weight of the discovery and the conversation with Felicity hung in the air like a cloud I couldn't escape. The betrayal was still fresh. But there was something else now too, something I hadn't expected: uncertainty. I didn't know how to move forward with my sister. I didn't know how to rebuild what had been lost. The workshop was no longer a sanctuary for me. It had become a painful reminder of everything that had changed. But somehow, I knew I had to keep moving forward. For Dad. For me. The days that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions. I went through the motions of my everyday life, but the weight of my sister's betrayal and the loss of the workshop lingered, gnawing at me. I didn't know what I wanted to accomplish, whether it was closure, justice, or simply peace of mind, but I knew one thing: I couldn't let Felicity get away with this. Not without understanding the depth of what she had done. I needed to make her see the hurt she'd caused, to make her understand that this wasn't just about property or sentimental value. It was about family. It was about a connection that was more important than anything material. I spent days thinking about my next move, obsessing over the idea of confronting Felicity once again. But this time I wouldn't go in unprepared. I wanted her to feel the sting of what she'd taken from me. I wanted her to understand the full impact of her actions, and I wanted it to come in a way that was undeniable, a way she couldn't ignore. And then it hit me. I remembered the drawer. The journal. The words my father had written, the way he had spoken about Felicity's coldness and how she'd planned to sell the workshop long before he had even passed. Those words were proof of everything I'd suspected. Felicity thought she could erase the past, move on, and leave me behind. But what if I could show her exactly how much she'd underestimated me? What if I could take that journal, and with it, reveal her betrayal to the world, something that she could never take back? The idea grew in my mind, and soon, I had a plan. It was a subtle form of revenge, but it would hit her where it would hurt the most: her reputation. I called a family meeting. It had been a few weeks since I'd last spoken to Felicity, but after our conversation, I knew it was time to bring things into the open. I didn't know what would happen when I confronted her with the truth, but I knew I couldn't keep living with the weight of it all. Not anymore. We met at the old house, now empty of all the memories we once shared. Felicity arrived first, as always, with that same practiced air of control she'd worn throughout the entire ordeal. She greeted me with a stiff hug, her eyes scanning the space like she had already moved on, mentally and emotionally. "Clara," she said, her voice cautious. "What's this all about? Why'd you want to meet here?" I let her wait for a moment, letting the tension build between us. She wasn't ready for what was coming. "I found something," I said quietly, holding the journal I'd taken from the workshop. "Something that changes everything." Her face went pale as I slid the journal across the table. She glanced at it, and I could see the fear in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "What's that?" she asked, trying to sound nonchalant but failing miserably. "It's Dad's journal," I said, my voice low and deliberate. "I found it in the workshop, hidden in a drawer that you must have overlooked." I read it, Felicity. I know everything. Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw genuine emotion flicker in her gaze. But it wasn't regret, it was panic. Clara, she began, her voice faltering, please. Don't, I held up my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. No. You don't get to control this anymore. You sold the workshop. You sold our father's legacy, and you never thought about how that would affect me. You never even gave me the chance to say goodbye to it. You think you can just erase everything that mattered to me, but it's not that simple. Felicity opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. I don't know why you thought you could make this decision without me, I continued. I don't know why you thought you could hide your actions from me. But I found out. And I'm not going to just sit back and let you get away with this. I stood up, pacing in front of her, the journal still on the table between us. My heart pounded in my chest, but this time, it wasn't out of fear or anger. It was out of a sense of control, a feeling that, for the first time, I was taking charge of my own story. You didn't think I cared about the workshop, did you? I said. You thought I'd let you get away with selling it off without a second thought, just because I wasn't as handy as you are. But that workshop was a part of me, Felicity. It was where I learned who I was. It was where Dad taught me everything. And you think you could just take it all away from me? Felicity's face was flushed now, her jaw clenched. She wasn't going to apologize. I knew that. She never had been one to admit when she was wrong. I thought it was the right thing to do, she finally muttered, her eyes darting away from mine. I thought I was helping you, Clara. You were never going to use that space. It was just a burden to you. Helping me? I scoffed. You weren't helping me. You were helping yourself. You were making things easier for you, while I was left to deal with the aftermath. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off once again. Here's the thing, Felicity, I said, I'm not going to let you walk away from this. Not anymore. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. Everyone knows what you took from me. I'm going to show them the truth. Her eyes flickered with alarm, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her confident facade. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. You wouldn't, I have a copy of the journal, I said, my voice steady and cold. The journal where Dad wrote about his thoughts on you, about how you planned to sell the workshop. It's all in there. Your coldness. Your plan to get rid of everything that reminded you of him. Felicity looked like she was about to implode. I knew her well enough to see the fear in her eyes. The one thing she'd always cared about was her reputation, how people saw her. And I was about to take that from her. I'm not going to send it to anyone, I said, my voice softer now, but still firm. I don't need to. I just wanted you to know that I know. And that I'm not going to let you make decisions for me anymore. I picked up the journal and stood up. You've done enough damage, Felicity. But you're not going to ruin me. Not anymore. I walked toward the door, pausing for a moment to turn back. I'm done. But I hope, one day, you'll understand what you've done. Because right now, you don't get it. And with that, I left. I never spoke to Felicity about the workshop again. Over time, she came to understand that I wasn't someone she could control anymore. She tried to apologize a few months later, but it was too late. The damage had been done, and I had made my peace with it. As for the workshop, it stayed with Thomas Bellamy. He restored it, keeping it intact, honoring the space where my father had built a life for himself. He even asked me if I wanted to come back and work there sometime. It wasn't the same as it had been, but it was enough.